The lobby of the Nexus Innovations Tower was a silent, sprawling cathedral of glass and steel. After midnight, the usual hum of frantic, brilliant activity was replaced by a sterile, echoing quiet. Cool blue light emanated from the recessed fixtures, reflecting off the polished marble floors and making the vast space feel like the bottom of a deep, futuristic ocean. It was in this intimidating silence that Maya Vance felt most at home. She pushed through the heavy glass doors, a small, unassuming figure in the cavernous space. At 19, she still had the slight build of a teenager, which was amplified by her attire. She wore a faded gray hoodie with the logo of a long-defunct video game, a pair of artfully ripped jeans, and worn-out sneakers. A heavy backpack was slung over one shoulder, and the faint beat of a synth-heavy soundtrack leaked from her earbuds. Her mind wasn't on her surroundings. It was 2 miles deep in a complex quantum computing problem she'd been wrestling with all day. The solution was shimmering just at the edge of her consciousness, and she had come back to the lab to pin it down. She approached the sleek, formidable security turnstiles and, out of habit, patted the pockets of her jeans. Nothing. She checked her hoodie. Nothing. A small frown creased her brow as she realized her ID badge was exactly where she'd left it on her workstation, on the top floor. A simple, human error. She turned her attention to the massive, imposing security desk that sat like a monolith in the center of the lobby. Behind it sat a man who seemed to be a permanent part of the fixture. His name was Frank, and his sour, jowly face was illuminated by the glow of a small television playing a sports replay. He was a man whose sense of importance was directly proportional to the size of his desk and the emptiness of the lobby. Maya approached the desk politely, pulling out an earbud. "Excuse me," she said, her voice quiet. Frank's eyes flickered up from his TV, and he scanned her from head to toe. His expression instantly curdled from boredom into a kind of smug, dismissive contempt. He saw a scruffy teenager, a troublemaker, a nobody. "Yeah, what do you want?" he grunted, not bothering to mute the television. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you, but I seem to have left my ID badge upstairs," Maya explained calmly. "My name is Maya Vance. I work in the quantum research lab on the 40th floor. If you could just look me up in the employee directory, I'd really appreciate it." Frank let out a short, sharp laugh that was more of a scoff. "The quantum lab. The top floor. Sure you do, kid." He leaned back in his chair, puffing out his chest. "Enjoying this. The only thing on the top floor is the executive suite. And you ain't no executive, so why don't you tell me the real story? You a delivery kid got lost looking for the mailroom." Maya felt a flicker of annoyance, but she suppressed it. She had dealt with people like Frank her entire life, people who could not see past her age and her casual clothes to the mind within. "I'm not a delivery person," she said, her voice still even. "I am the head of the Quantum Research Division. My office is 40A. If you just check your system, you'll see my name and my photo." Her calm, factual statement only seemed to infuriate him more. It was a challenge to his judgment, to his authority. "Look, you're not listening." "Sweetheart," he said, his voice taking on a menacing, patronizing tone. He stood up, using his physical bulk to try and intimidate her. "The rule is simple, no ID." No entry. I don't care if you say you're the Queen of England. Rules are rules. I understand the need for security protocols, Maya countered, refusing to be flustered. But there must be a procedure for forgotten badges. I can show you another form of ID. I can answer any security question you have. The procedure is you go home and come back when you have your badge, Frank snapped. His face was getting red. He was enjoying this far too much. This was the most excitement he'd had all week. Now, I've been nice. I want you to turn around and walk out that door before I have to call the police and have you escorted out for trespassing. He had drawn his line in the sand. He was the gatekeeper, the man with the badge and the uniform, and she was the insignificant kid he had the power to deny. The standoff hung in the silent, cavernous lobby, the immovable object of bureaucratic prejudice against the unstoppable force of a CEO who just wanted to get to her office. Maya held her ground, her small frame seeming even more diminutive before the guard's puffed-up posture. She refused to be dismissed. "Look," she said, her voice still steady, though a note of frustration was beginning to creep in. She pointed a slender finger toward the smoked glass dome of a security camera directly above them. "That is a 12K resolution optical scanner. My presence in this lobby has been logged. My biometrics captured. All you have to do is call your night supervisor, state that Maya Vance is in the lobby, and ask for a visual confirmation against the employee file. It would take 30 seconds. Her calm, logical, and technically precise explanation was the worst thing she could have said. To Frank, it sounded like an insult. This slip of a girl in a hoodie wasn't just questioning his authority, she was lecturing him on the specifics of the multi-million-dollar security system he was paid to operate. It was an intolerable challenge to his domain. "Oh, a real tech expert, are we?" he sneered, his face darkening. "You think you can tell me how to do my job? I know the procedures." "And procedure says I don't make verification calls after midnight for non-emergencies. And a little girl who forgot her keys is not an emergency." He was inventing policy on the spot, building a bureaucratic wall around his own prejudice. "This isn't about a forgotten key," Maya said, her patience finally wearing thin. "This is about a critical quantum computing issue that could affect our Q2 launch. I need to get to my lab." "Your lab," Frank mocked, making air quotes with his thick fingers. "Is that what you kids are calling your bedrooms these days? Listen, did you have a fight with your boyfriend? Is that it? Is he upstairs and won't let you in?" The personal, demeaning nature of the attack was a clear escalation. He was no longer a guard enforcing a rule. He was a bully enjoying a sport. Maya sighed, seeing the futility of the conversation. "Fine. There is an internal phone on the other side of the turnstiles. I will call my chief operating officer's extension myself." She made a move to walk around the desk toward the gate. Frank moved with surprising speed, stepping in front of her to block her path. He was close enough now that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Whoa, there, little missy." "Where do you think you're going?" he said, putting a heavy hand on her shoulder to stop her. The touch was possessive, a clear assertion of physical dominance. "I told you, you're not going anywhere. This area is for authorized personnel only." The act of putting his hand on her crossed a final line. It was a physical manifestation of his contempt, his belief that he could handle her, control her, put her in her place. He smirked down at her, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. He felt powerful. He had cornered this arrogant, mouthy kid, and there was nothing she could do about it. He was the law here. In that moment, something in Maya shifted. She looked up at his face, at the petty enjoyment he was taking in her humiliation, and the frustration she felt was replaced by a kind of cold, quiet disappointment. She had built this entire company, this billion-dollar empire, on the principle of hiring the brightest, most respectful minds. She had fostered a culture of collaboration and intellectual curiosity, and here, at the very front gate of her kingdom, sat this man, a man who judged people by their clothes, who got his pleasure from bullying those he perceived as weaker. He was a virus in the system she had so carefully built. She did not flinch or try to push past him. Instead, she took a single, deliberate step backward, forcing him to drop his hand. She broke eye contact with him, as if he were no longer a part of the equation to be solved. She pulled out her sleek, prototype smartphone, a piece of technology at least 3 generations ahead of anything on the market. Frank saw the phone and let out another derisive snort. "That's it. Run home to Mommy," he sneered, crossing his arms over his chest. Triumphant. "Tell her you're in big trouble with the security man at the fancy building. Go on. I've got all night." He watched, gloating, as she unlocked the phone with a glance and touched a single contact on the screen. He was certain he had won. He had successfully defended the lobby of Nexus Innovations from a lost, troublesome teenager. He had no idea that she wasn't calling for a ride home. She was calling down the thunder from the top of the mountain. Frank watched with a self-satisfied smirk as Maya held the impossibly thin phone to her ear. He folded his thick arms across his chest, settling in for the show. He expected tears, a frantic, whispered plea to a parent or a boyfriend. But Maya's voice, when she spoke, was devoid of any panic. It was as calm and cool as the polished marble floor. "David, it's Maya." She paused, listening. Frank couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but he saw the flicker of intense focus in her eyes. "The quantum array is stable," she continued, a statement of such bizarre, technical specificity that it momentarily confused Frank. "I'm the one who's not. I'm in the main lobby." Another pause. "I forgot my badge," she stated simply. "The night guard, his name is Frank, is refusing me entry. He's been unprofessional." The word hung in the air. It was a clinical, precise word, all the more damning for its lack of emotion. She wasn't complaining. She was reporting a system failure. "He's physically barring my entry and has threatened to call the police," she added. "I need you to come down, and perhaps bring Michael with you." She listened one last time, then said, "Thank you, David," and ended the call. The entire conversation had taken less than 30 seconds. Frank let out a loud, theatrical laugh. "David and Michael. Huh. You're calling in the big guns now. Are you, what are they, your big brothers? You think a couple of frat boys are going to intimidate me? I deal with punks like you all the time, sweetheart." He was enjoying this immensely in his small, circumscribed world. This was a moment of supreme power. He had successfully thwarted an intruder, faced down her empty threats, and stood his ground. He felt like a hero in his own small drama. Maya did not respond to his taunts. She didn't even look at him anymore. Her silence was more unsettling than any argument would have been. She simply stood a few feet from his desk, her backpack slung over her shoulder, and fixed her gaze on the brushed steel doors of the executive elevator bank at the far end of the lobby. Her stillness was unnerving. Frank had expected her to storm out in a huff or dissolve into tears after her failed phone call, but she just stood there, waiting. Her quiet confidence began to feel less like teenage bravado and more like patience, as if she were waiting for a pre-scheduled event to occur. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue," Frank taunted, trying to break her composure. "Your backup not coming after all." Maya didn't answer. Her eyes remained locked on the elevator doors. The minutes ticked by in the vast, silent lobby. The only sounds were the hushed commentary from Frank's small television and the faint hum of the building's massive HVAC system. To Frank, it was a silent confirmation of his victory. The David and Michael she had called were clearly not coming. She was just too stubborn or too embarrassed to admit defeat and leave. He was about to tell her to get out one last time when a soft, clear ding echoed through the space. It was a sound Frank knew well. It wasn't the sound of the normal staff elevators. It was the chime of the express executive lift, the one that offered a direct, high-speed ride from the lobby to the 40th floor executive suite. He scowled. It must be one of the senior vice presidents working late. He hated it when they did that. They always looked at him like he was part of the furniture. He instinctively straightened his tie and smoothed down his uniform, preparing to offer a respectful nod to whichever corporate bigwig emerged. The light above the elevator doors flashed, indicating its arrival. Frank watched, annoyed that his little power trip had been interrupted. He had no idea that it hadn't been interrupted. It had just reached its conclusion. The summons had been answered. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper of perfectly calibrated machinery. 2 men emerged, and the atmosphere in the lobby instantly crackled with an intensity that made the air feel thin. The first man was David Chen, the Chief Operating Officer of Nexus Innovations. He was a man who moved with the quiet, formidable confidence of someone who commanded multi-billion-dollar divisions before breakfast. His suit was dark, exquisitely cut, and he radiated an aura of such focused, no-nonsense authority that even the marble floors seemed to defer to him. The second man was Michael Reed, the company's head of corporate security. Michael was a large, imposing ex-detective with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and a reputation for being even tougher than he looked. The simultaneous appearance of these 2 men in the lobby after midnight was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. It was the corporate equivalent of the Secret Service showing up. Frank's blood ran cold. He snapped to attention, his earlier smugness evaporating into a mist of pure, unadulterated fear. His mind raced. What did I miss? Was there a silent alarm, a security breach? He straightened his tie with trembling fingers, preparing to be the model of a vigilant, professional security officer. He quickly decided his best course of action was to demonstrate his control over the situation with the trespassing teenager. "Mr. Chen, Mr. Reed," Good evening, sirs, Frank stammered, his voice suddenly 2 octaves higher than normal. Everything is secure. I was just dealing with this individual who is attempting to gain unauthorized access to the building. He gestured dismissively toward Maya, trying to frame himself as the hero of the story. But David Chen and Michael Reed didn't even look at him. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of serious concern and profound respect, were locked on Maya. They strode past the security desk as if it didn't exist, their expensive shoes making sharp, purposeful clicks on the floor, and stopped directly in front of her. Frank watched, utterly bewildered, as the powerful COO of the entire company addressed the girl in the ripped jeans with a tone of deep, deferential apology. "Ms. Vance, are you all right?" David Chen asked, his voice low and laced with concern. "I am so sorry for this unacceptable delay. We came the moment you called." Frank's brain stalled. He felt a wave of cognitive dissonance so strong it was almost nauseating. Ms. Vance. He had heard her say the name, but he had dismissed it. It couldn't be. He looked from the powerful, impeccably dressed COO to the small, hoodie-clad teenager. It made no sense. His entire understanding of the world, a world built on the clear, visible markers of power suits, watches, expensive shoes, was beginning to crumble. "I'm fine, David," Maya said, her voice retaining its quiet calm, though he could see a hint of weariness in her eyes, just a little, held up. David Chen's jaw tightened. He turned his head slowly, his gaze finally falling upon Frank. The look in his eyes was not one of anger, it was one of cold, surgical fury. It was the look of a man who had discovered a cancer in his own home. Michael Reed, the head of security, took one menacing step forward, his shadow falling over Frank's imposing desk. "Frank," David said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, yet it carried more weight than a thunderclap in the silent lobby. "This is Maya Vance." He paused, letting the name sink in. "Perhaps you can explain to me, in detail, why you felt it was appropriate to physically and verbally harass the founder and chief executive officer of this company." The words hit Frank with the force of a physical blow. Founder, chief executive officer. The concepts crashed into his mind, one after another, each one more impossible than the last. He looked at the girl, the kid, the punk, the one he had called sweetheart and threatened to have arrested, and he saw her now, truly saw her, through David Chen's eyes. He saw the quiet, unshakable confidence he had mistaken for arrogance. He saw the patience he had mistaken for weakness. He was a foot soldier who had just spent the last hour trying to bully the Empress. The ground opened up beneath him, and he was falling. Frank's world tilted on its axis. The words founder and chief executive officer echoed in the cavernous lobby, refusing to compute. His mind scrambled for an alternative explanation. It had to be a joke, a test, a bizarre corporate role-playing exercise. He looked at David Chen's face, searching for a hint of humor, but found only a landscape of frozen, unforgiving rage. He looked at Michael Reed, whose stony expression confirmed the terrifying reality. Then his eyes drifted back to the girl, Maya Vance. The hoodie and ripped jeans didn't change, but his perception of them did. The casual clothes no longer looked like a delinquent's uniform, but like the effortless, unbothered attire of someone so powerful They are completely above dress codes. Her quiet confidence was not teenage arrogance. It was the deep, unshakable stillness of the person at the absolute center of power. Her youth was not a sign of immaturity, but of terrifying, prodigious genius. He was seeing her for the first time, and the sight was blinding. I don't understand," Frank stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. She's just a kid." "This kid," David Chen said, taking a deliberate step closer to the desk, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "founded this company in her parents' garage when she was 16. She wrote the base code for our quantum processors, which are currently 5 years ahead of any competitor. She holds the patents for every key piece of technology that generates the revenue that pays for this building, this desk, and your salary. She is not a kid. She is the reason we all have jobs, now." David leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk, his knuckles white. "I want you to recount for me, very carefully, what you have said to Ms. Vance in the last hour. She mentioned you accused her of trying to see her boyfriend. Is that correct?" Frank's mind went blank with panic. He opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. A thick bead of sweat rolled down from his hairline. "She also informed me," David continued, his voice relentless, "that you physically placed your hands on her to prevent her from using an internal phone. Did you, or did you not? Put your hands on the CEO of this corporation, Frank." I was just following procedure." Frank finally managed to get out, the words sounding hollow and foolish even to his own ears. "She had no idea I had to. I had to maintain the security of the facility." The security of the facility, Michael Reed, the head of security, spoke for the first time. His voice was a low rumble, like grinding stones. "Frank, I designed the security protocols for this building myself. The protocol for an employee without a badge is to verify their identity via the internal directory and visual confirmation from their department head. The protocol is not to verbally harass them, accuse them of criminal intent, and physically assault them. You weren't following procedure. You were indulging in a petty power trip." Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling his pathetic defense. He had no ground to stand on. He was exposed. His bullying and prejudice laid bare under the cold, fluorescent lights of the lobby. The full crushing weight of his colossal mistake finally landed on him. He had spent an hour tormenting the one person in this entire global empire that he could not afford to offend. He had treated the company's reclusive, genius founder like a piece of garbage. His face, which had been red with anger and then pale with confusion, now seemed to collapse in on itself. His jaw went slack, hanging open in a silent O of pure, unfiltered horror. His eyes were wide, glassy, unseeing. He was a man who had been happily playing with what he thought was a toy, only to realize it was an armed and active bomb, and he had just pulled the pin. He looked at Maya, who had remained silent throughout the entire exchange. She was just watching him, her expression not one of anger or triumph, but of a kind of weary, clinical disappointment. It was worse than hatred. It was the look a brilliant scientist might give a failed experiment. Michael Reed stepped up to the desk. He held out his hand, palm up. "Frank," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, your badge, your building access keys, your uniform locker key. Hand them over, now." The simple command was the final, humiliating severance. Frank's hands trembled violently as he fumbled at his belt. Unclipping his keys, he shakily unpinned the badge from his chest, the plastic ID card, the small symbol of the minor authority he had so enjoyed abusing, now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He placed his items in Michael's outstretched hand, stripped of his badge and keys. He suddenly seemed to shrink, his uniform looking like a costume on a defeated man. He was no longer a gatekeeper. He was just Frank, a middle-aged man who had just made the biggest mistake of his life. And the quiet teenager in the hoodie held his entire future in the palm of her hand. Frank stood there, a man hollowed out, the symbols of his minor authority now resting in the palm of his superior. His gaze darted to Maya, his eyes pleading. This was his last hope. The CEO, the one who could, with a word, undo this nightmare. "Please," he croaked, taking a shuffling step forward. "Ms. Vance, ma'am, I am so sorry. I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would never have. Please, I have a family, a mortgage. It was a mistake. Please don't do this." His plea was a pathetic confession. He wasn't sorry for his behavior. He was sorry he had been caught. He was sorry he had chosen the wrong person to bully. Maya, who had been silent, finally looked at him, and her voice, when she spoke, was quiet. But it cut through the vast lobby with absolute clarity. "That's the entire problem." "Frank," she said, and there was no anger in her tone, only a deep, profound disappointment. "It shouldn't matter who I am. You shouldn't have to know that I am the CEO to treat me with basic human decency." She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. What if I had been a new intern on her first day, terrified and lost? What if I had been a young student delivering a portfolio, hoping for a job? What if I was just a citizen who had walked in by mistake? Would it have been acceptable to treat any of them the way you treated me? She let the questions hang in the air. This company is built on innovation, yes, but beneath that, it is built on a foundation of respect, the idea that the best work comes from people who feel valued and safe. You failed that principle tonight. Frank, not because you disrespected a CEO, but because you chose to harass someone you believed was powerless. That is a failure not of procedure, but of character, and it has no place at Nexus Innovations. Her judgment was absolute, delivered not with the fire of a vengeful boss, but with the cool, incisive logic of the founder who had written the company's core values herself. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Michael Reed. It was the only signal needed. "Let's go, Frank," Michael said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Collect your things." As Michael escorted the ghost-white, defeated man toward the employee lockers to begin the process of his termination, Maya turned to David. "Let's go to work," she said, her focus already shifting away from the unpleasant incident and back to the quantum puzzle that awaited her. That array isn't going to stabilize itself. David nodded, a deep respect for her composure shining in his eyes. He led the way to the executive elevator. As they stepped inside, the polished steel doors sliding shut, Maya took one last look at the lobby she had fought to enter. She made a mental note. First item on the agenda for the morning's executive meeting, a mandatory company-wide review and retraining program. It would be called the front door policy, and it would ensure that every single person who entered their buildings, from a visiting dignitary to a food delivery courier, would be treated with the same unwavering level of dignity and respect. The lesson Frank had just learned in the most brutal way possible would become a cornerstone of her empire. Her company wouldn't just be the smartest and most innovative of the world. She would make sure it was also the kindest. The doors closed, and the elevator began its silent, swift ascent. It just goes to show, you should never judge a book by its cover if you believe in treating everyone with respect. Hit that like button and let us know what you thought of this story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another empowering story from our channel. Thank you for watching with us today. We can't wait to see you for the next one.